Coming up on today's edition of Vikings Now by Chat Sports, we were discussing the recent hype around UDFA linebacker Ivan Pace Jr. We're also going to be discussing the topic about possibly bringing in Kyle Van Noy, since the Vikings do have $18 million still left on this year's cap space. Then also we're going to be doing a year preview for Jordan Addison. My name is Patrick Seatman. Thank you guys for joining us on today's edition of Vikings Now. And before we hop into everything, guys, if you guys want to become a more informed Vikings fan, hit that subscribe button. I want to be your go-to Minnesota Vikings YouTube channel. Anytime any news or rumors or trade rumors, injury news, whatever it may be, comes out around your Minnesota Vikings, I want to be your go-to Vikings channel. So lock us in, hit that subscribe button right now, and let's get started on today's show. And the first topic we're going to be diving into is the hype that has been coming out around UDFA linebacker Ivan Pace Jr. You know, most UDFAs in the NFL don't end up making the team, but Ivan Pace Jr., it's looking like he will be one of the linebackers that are on this team when the Vikings finally get down to that 53-man roster. Right now, how the linebacker room kind of shakes out, Brian Asamoah, we know he's going to be the featured name this year. We know all the hype around him year two in this system, and how Brian Flores will kind of get the most out of him. A lot of fans are excited to watch him play. But then the veteran, Jordan Hicks. You know, there's a lot of question marks if Jordan Hicks will maintain that starting position at linebacker too. And a lot of Vikings fans are starting to question, could it be Ivan Pace? But some of the other backups like Troy Dye, Troy Reeder, those guys will be solid rotation pieces for the Minnesota Vikings this upcoming year. But overall, 100%, I do think Ivan Pace Jr. will be making this football team. I just think the question further than that will be, will he end up playing? How many reps and how many games will Ivan Pace end up starting at that linebacker spot? Because, listen, I am a huge fan of Brian Asamoah. We know this. I'm super excited to watch him play. He's versatile. He's fast. He hits. And he's one of those guys that I think Brian Flores, our new DC, will get the most out of. But Jordan Hicks, he lost a step last season. When we brought in Jordan Hicks from the Cardinals heading into next year, I was like, hey, this is going to be a great veteran linebacker that we're going to bring in, but the tape doesn't lie with him. He looked like he lost a step this past season, and he wasn't the same guy that he was back in Arizona. But Ivan Pace, his final season in his senior year at Cincinnati, I mean, he was an absolute dog. And that tackle for loss number down at the bottom of your screen right now, that's 100% correct. That is not a typo. This man had 20 and a half tackles for loss during his senior year at Cincinnati. He was supposed to be a top 100 pick during this year's NFL draft, but somehow he went undrafted, and the Minnesota Vikings were the lucky team that were able to swoop him up. But 136 tackles, 4 PBUs, and 2 forced fumbles. And a scouting report on Ivan Pace that we got from NFL Network, he's got a really dense frame at the linebacker position. He's not like a Tremaine Edmonds, for newly acquired Chicago Bears linebacker, who's 6'5", really long. He's like 6 foot, 220 pounds, really compact, got a really dense frame, which I absolutely love. And he's got the heart of a lion. Like, I know that's kind of a cheesy, corny saying, but this dude works his ass off. Every report that's kind of came out around him is that he's a great guy, hard worker, and he wants to be there, and he just will give you everything he has. And number 3, you can go throw on the highlight tape yourself. He's a hard hitter. He will meet a running back like a freight train in that hole in the middle of that offensive-defensive line scrum. I love his game. He's also got great feet, super elusive at that linebacker spot. But the one negative, I guess, is just his overall length. I guess you could kind of view the dense frame as a positive or a negative. But he is only 6 feet tall, 220 pounds, so he's not like that Tremaine Edmonds type of build. He is more of that kind of like shorter Roquan Smith linebacker archetype. But I'll ask you guys this question. I'll make this the pinned comment on today's video. How many games do you believe Ivan Pace will start this next season for the Minnesota Vikings? YouTube's going to throw you an ad break your way right now. Sit back, let it play, and answer today's pinned comment of how many games will Ivan Pace Jr. start this season. My overall take with how many games Ivan Pace will end up starting, I think it comes down to Jordan Hicks. I think Jordan Hicks will get the starting reps, especially during September, October, maybe give him the first 4 to 6 weeks to kind of still prove his worth with this football team. But I do believe that he will have a short leash, whether it is for Ivan Pace or a Troy Reeder or a Troy Dye. I do think Jordan Hicks maybe if the production value and just his overall play isn't there, we will see another guy step in and fill in for that role. So I do expect Ivan Pace to, maybe be that starting linebacker next to Brian Asamoah when the season ends. But at the beginning of the season, expect to still see a lot of Jordan Hicks at that linebacker too. Now, second topic on today's show, we're going to be discussing the Vikings' possibility of signing Kyle Van Noy. The Vikings still have $18 million to spend on this year's cap space, and they have a need at that linebacker edge position, so Kyle Van Noy was a name that was thrown out there. But Dustin Baker, a Vikings beat reporter, tossed out this idea, and he had this to say. He said this is a Brian Flores guy. The two were coworkers in New England and Miami. Ties from coaches to former players are vital and widespread in the NFL. Van Noy would offer a steady veteran presence in the Vikings locker room. Why do the Vikings need that? Well, Brian Asamoah is on tap to start, but what if he gets hurt? Flores would pivot to Troy Dye or Troy Reeder. Van Noy might be a smarter play in the situation. And I agree with Dustin. I do think if the Vikings, at that linebacker spot, if they have one injury to Brian Asamoah or Jordan Hicks, their depth is gone. I totally agree with what Dustin is saying here, that the Vikings do need to add more depth, specifically at that linebacker position. And honestly, in the whole Vikings defense, if you go position group by position group, they're one big injury away from their top dog at each kind of spot there from being a completely depleted room, but specifically at that linebacker spot. I think Kyle Van Noy would be a great addition, and he's an extremely versatile player. His production last year in 2022 was solid. 46 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble, and 5 sacks. He is that veteran savvy linebacker that isn't going to blow you away with his athletic ability, but it's his versatility. It's his kind of technique. It's just the way he gets it done. I'm a big fan of him, and obviously his connection with Brian Flores, I think Flo could get the most out of him. So I'm a big fan of Kyle Van Noy. I would be all in on this. Maybe it's a 1 year, $4 million type of prove-it deal with the Vikes. But I ask you guys, would you sign Kyle Van Noy with the Vikings' remaining cap space? Somehow we look up, and the Vikings, they went from having the least amount of cap space in the NFL, but after this Darius Smith trade and the Dalvin Cook, being cut situation, the Vikings have $18 million to spend. So would you sign Kyle Van Noy? Give me an S for sign or a P for pass. Now we're going to wrap up today's show with giving you guys a little Jordan Addison year preview. CBS Sports came out and said Jordan Addison could be the breakout player for the Minnesota Vikings in this upcoming year. But how the Vikings wide receiver room shakes out right now, you got top dog JJ, number 18. He's no doubt going to be wide receiver 1. You don't really need to spend too much time on that. But in the wide receiver 2 spot, right now I have Jordan Addison slated in there to most likely take over the wide receiver 2 reps. But don't be too shocked if KJ Osborne starts a year as wide receiver 2. We heard the reports coming out at Vikings mandatory or Vikings minicamp or rookie minicamp it was, that Jordan Addison was kind of struggling with picking up the playbook a little bit just because of how, complex Kevin O'Connell's system is. So maybe KOC, first month of the year, him and Kwesi sit down and him and Wes Phillips sit down and say, maybe our better option is to just trust KJ Osborne with those wide receiver 2 reps and to move Jordan Addison, the wide receiver 3, and kind of, let him get his feet a little warm and kind of let him get more accustomed to the offense. But I do expect Addison to take over at some point. But, this guy in his college career, he was just fantastic. He put up numbers, he put up insane numbers over his 3 years in college. I like the number one thing about Jordan Addison I love. He played a lot more on the outside at Pittsburgh, and then at USC in 2022, he hopped a lot more in the slot, and he was still productive both years. But, that 2021 season, 100 catches, 1,593 yards, he was absolutely fantastic. But my season prediction stats for Jordan Addison, I think he's going to have a big-time year. I think he's going to really take advantage of the one-on-one looks he's going to get. Because we know Justin Jefferson, you're going to have to double him. Most teams will, when they're game planning defensively for the Vikings, it's take away 18. Then it's probably take away 87, take away TJ Hawkinson. And then Jordan Addison, he's going to be stuck on a CB2 or maybe even a linebacker if he hops in the slot. So my season prediction for him, I'll go 66 receptions, 912 yards, and 7 touchdowns for Jordan Addison in year 1. But I'll throw you guys' way. Predict Addison's stats for his rookie season for the Minnesota Vikings. I just said it, a little over 900 yards for me with 7 touchdowns and 66 receptions. But I ask you guys, predict Jordan Addison's stats for his rookie season? Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. The season is almost here. I know we're in the dog days right now of the NFL calendar, but it's going to be Vikings training camp content sooner than you think. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Lock us in as your go-to Vikings channel. See you guys next time. Skol Vikes.